All right. Looks like we are live. Hello, hello. For those of you tuning in either today, Wednesday, May the 7th, or those of you who are watching this after the recording, welcome to another video included in the Neville lecture series. It's an ongoing series that I've started where we read through one of Neville's lectures, we highlight the important parts, the takeaways, the notes, because as always, I am here to help guide with better understanding, clarity, so that you can apply these teachings to your circumstances, your world, and your life. Today, we're going to be going over the lecture titled Seedtime and Harvest. This is an earlier lecture of Neville's. I believe it was 1956. We will be going through some of his later works in the coming weeks as we go over this series. But the earlier ones I especially love because they are they're very straightforward in terms of the law. Obviously, Neville spoke frequently about the law up until 1959 when he experienced the promise. After that, he did start to shift more, not exclusively, but speaking a lot more on the promise, which is arguably an incredibly, if not most important part of his teaching. So we will be getting into those lectures, but I want to start this series with things that feel easier to digest because there is a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of content. It's very easy to get overwhelmed. So this is my way of hopefully helping break things down. I've gotten amazing feedback from all of you. So as always, as I do in these videos, I'll be switching back and forth between screen sharing, reading through the lecture, and then pausing to take note, make any commentary, and anything of that sort. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump on in. Let's see here. There we go. Yep, 1956. Seedtime and the Harvest. Audio still looks good. Just double checking the settings really quick. Looking good. As you have been told, this morning's subject is Seedtime and Harvest. Although it bears the same title as my latest book, it is not to be found in that book, for that book is an attempt to interpret some of the more difficult passages of the Bible. I have given you, in the 9 chapters, a mystical view, and also a certain approach, how you yourself may approach the interpretation of the Bible. For, as you know, it is not a book of history. And so, when I become aware of deeper meanings in the passages than those normally assigned to them, I began to see them or to apprehend them mystically. And so I have given you a mystical interpretation of many of the darker passages. For instance, when Solomon made himself a chariot of the wood of Lebanon, he made himself. No one made it for him. That's what you must do. That's what I must do. That's what everyone must do. And in that chapter, I showed you the wood is not wood as you know wood. It means the wood of Lebanon is the incorruptible mind, but you make it for yourself. And we showed you the sides, what they were made of, and what the meanings really are. Then we took that very strange passage, the instruction to the disciples to take off their shoes or provide no shoes when they travel. And we showed you the word shoe is not just the thing I wear on my foot. It is a symbol of the spirit of let me do it for you. For the shoe takes upon itself not only the dirt and the muck that would normally fall upon the wearer's foot, but it protects the wearer from any contact with the outer world. And so anyone who offers to do for us what we should do and could do far better ourselves is offering himself as our shoe. And if I would awaken spiritually, I must do it for myself. I must take my own mind and control it. Take my wonderful imagination and actually control it and set it to noble purposes and not have some intermediary come in between myself and God. For the God of this world is an internal God. He is that inevitable force that expresses in outward facts the latent tendencies of the soul. And so, if I would discover that God, I cannot have you do my work for me. I cannot have you eat my spiritual food and expect to grow spiritually. So that is really the attempt of the 9 chapters in the book, Seedtime and Harvest. So I'm going to pause really quick right there, because again, I know that was a lot. So as some of you may know, Neville, one of Neville's books, he wrote, I believe, 10 books. And one of them was titled Seedtime and Harvest. And in that book, as he explained, it was the purpose was to go into the darker, maybe more obscure passages of the Bible and interpret those passages that may be difficult to interpret mystical lens. It is a fantastic read. I absolutely recommend everybody read it if you have not. But he's explaining in this lecture, this is not going to be the same as that book. It's not going to be delving into the same thing as that book. But he does give a couple of examples of interpretations from passages of the Bible. The instructions of the disciples to take off their shoes or provide no shoes is what that symbolizes. Is we need to do this for ourselves. The word disciple is discipline. The interpretation is discipline. So the 12 disciples are meant to be taken as the 12 disciplines of the mind. It's 12 states of consciousness that we must move through to reach the state of Christ, or I guess you could say enlightenment, awakening, whatever you want to call it. I have made a video about the 12 disciples. If you're interested in learning more about the interpretation, you can also read in Neville's book, Your Faith is Your Fortune, where he talks about, he dedicates a chapter to the 12 disciples, but not to get too far off topic. What he's trying to express here is the importance of we must be the ones to do this. We must be the doers. We have to operate the law. It does not operate itself. So he's just giving some examples of some of the meanings behind those passages that he took from example. But I think it's really important to note this and remember this. We cannot wait for somebody to come along to help us or save us or anything like that. We must do it ourselves, basically. But let's continue. But this morning's subject, I want to approach it differently. The statement is taken from the book of Genesis, the 8th chapter of Genesis. It is a promise made to man that while the earth remaineth, seedtime and harvest, hot and cold, summer and winter, day and night, shall not cease. We are told that man was placed in a garden. The garden was completed. Every tree was bearing fruit. Everything in the world was finished. And he was placed in the garden to dress it and to keep it. He doesn't plant it. He doesn't do a thing but dress it and keep it. He is not called upon to make trees or to grow new trees. Everything is finished. You guys might see where this is going. As we are told in John, every conceivable human drama, every little plot, every little plan in the drama of life is already worked out as mere possibilities. Well, we are not in them, but they are overpoweringly real when we are in them. Be speaking of states here. When we're in the state, it is a real physical circumstance, but it exists as a possibility or hypothetical when we are not in the state, but creation is finished. So man can get in touch with that particular choice. For my imagination can put me in touch inwardly with the state desired. So I am in it. If I am in it, I will realize it in my world. The states in which we find ourselves are the seed time. The harvest is simply the encountering of events and circumstances of life. This part's important. This part's important. If you're taking notes, take note. But man's memory is so short, he forgets the seed time. But all ends run true to origins. So if the origin, say, is misfortune, the end will be misfortune. But when you reap misfortune, you wonder, why should it have happened to me? When I have set a thing like this, when have I set a thing like this in motion? Haven't I given to the poor? Haven't I attended service? Haven't I prayed daily? And why should these things happen? But you see, my God never forgets, because he always gives the end in harmony with the origin. And you and I are selectors. We don't make. We are not creators. Create the whole vast world of creation. As is told in Illustrates, I am the beginning and the end. There is nothing to come that has not been and is. So look upon creation as finished. And you and I are only the selectors of that which is. By selectors, I mean that you and I have the privilege, we may not exercise it, but it is our privilege to select that aspect of reality to which we will respond. And in responding to it, we bring it into existence for ourselves. Not knowing we are so privileged, we simply go through the world reflecting the circumstances of life, not realizing we have the power to create or outpicture the circumstances of life. Whew, a lot to break down there. So he's right away, seed time and harvest is a metaphor for the subconscious impression and then the 3D expression that follows. We plant the seed, that seed is then harvested as it bears fruit. And once again, he's putting emphasis on the fact that creation is finished, which is a point that is easy for us to forget and we always have to come back to. We are not technically creators. We are not creating anything because there is nothing to create. We are selectors. And that is probably a term that I will be more mindful of going forward, because I do believe that it can be challenging for some people who are new to this, who are under the impression that we have to make this thing happen. We have to make this outcome. We have to create it. That's not what is happening here. We are selecting the state that already is, that already exists. And he also gives reference to the fact, and this is the important part, every seed must be brought to harvest. Every impression must become an expression unless revised, unless we plant a new seed that is more powerful in feeling to sort of override it. But otherwise, every impression must become an expression. And where we find difficulty is that we are not aware or we forget when we are planting the seed. So, as Neville says, man's memory is so short, he forgets the seed time. So we may be completely oblivious to this impression that we left, and then a day, a week, a month, a few months later, it bears fruit, and we're wondering, where the hell did this come from? What the hell is going on here? We've all had this experience. And also, again, why I stress the importance of self-observation, really beginning to see what we are planting in the mind. And we're going to get more into what impression really looks like and more about that. But it is important to notice that we have the tendency to forget when we've left these impressions. And then when something happens, something unfortunate, we then go, well, what the hell happened? Aren't I a good person? Didn't I do good here and there? Like, why must this be the case? Why is this showing up for me? But God always gives what is impressed. God never forgets and always gives the end in harmony with the origin. So once again, if for those of you who've been watching my channel for a while, you can go back to my earliest videos. I always talk about self-observation. This is why we really need to start seeing the connection, the relationship between what we are planting in here and then what becomes out here. It's how we build our faith. Now let's keep going. So now let us analyze what I personally mean by seed time. If everything is finished and completed, then why the promise there shall be seed time and harvest as long as the earth remains? Now, seed time, to those who are here this morning, as we should really know, we are not taking it literally. Our seed time is that moment in time where you and I react to anything in this world. It may be to an object, it may be to an individual, it may be to a bit of news that we have overheard, but the moment of reaction, that emotional response, is our attitude. Our attitudes are the seed times of life. And although we may not remember that seed time or the moment of response, nature never forgets. And when it suddenly appears in our world, that suddenness is only the emergence of a hidden continuity. It was continuous from the moment of reaction until it appeared in the world. Its appearance in the world is harvest, so you and I may harvest anything we desire. But we must first have a seed time. It must be preceded by a moment of response or an attitude. How often you say, I approached it in the wrong attitude, or he is in the wrong attitude, or you must change your attitude if you would get on in this life. I have said it, you have said it, maybe we have said it to each other, but we know the importance of right attitude. We know this much, that I can change my attitude if circumstances change. That's automatic. We know that if something happens suddenly in my world, of which up to that moment I was not aware, I, becoming aware of a change of circumstance, would automatically produce in myself a change of attitude. We all do that, morning, noon, and night. But that's not important. That is a reflect of life. 99% of the world reflect life. Now, can I consciously, can I voluntarily, can I deliberately produce in myself a change of attitude, one of my own discretion, one that I myself single out, and not one that is determined by or in any way is dependent on a stimulus of a change in the object itself? This part is important. Must you change before I will change my attitude towards you? Sorry if you hear noise in the background. It'll pass shortly. we got some people working on the yard today. My apologies. Must you change before I will change my attitude towards you? We know that if you do change, I will change my attitude towards you. But I must go through life simply reflecting those changes in the objects. And can I not deliberately determine the change prior to the change in the object? For if I can, I am moving towards complete control of my fate and becoming the master of my fate if I can assume an active, positive attitude and not depend upon changes in the object for changes in myself. If I can do it, I really am, if not a complete master, I am becoming more in control of the circumstances of life. But 99% of the world waits for things to happen on the outside and then they reflect. That's no accomplishment at all. If we would awaken and become real selectors of the beauty of this garden that God gave us so that we can single out that particular aspect to which we will respond, then we will do it by deliberately changing our attitude toward life itself. So I know that may have been a lot. I'm going to break that down really quick because that part is really, really important. What Neville's saying here is where we are being asked to step up, the challenge, so to speak, is can I change my attitude of another before they change? Because typically speaking, as it were, before we knew about the law, 99 or 100% of the time, we have to see change in the object or the person, and then we respond to it. Then we react differently. This person has to start showing up nicer, and then I could start seeing them in a different light. What Neville's saying here is he's challenging us. Can you do it despite not seeing a change first? Can you change your attitude of another before they have reflected that change? So even if this person is still showing up as a complete asshole, can I, in my mind, begin to see them differently? That's what we are being asked to do here, and not just wait for the circumstances to change first, because it's all us pushed out. We must first see them differently, and then they will reflect and show up differently. Let's continue. And Neville goes on to talk about a little fable about the fox and the grapes. You all know it, the fox and the grapes. When he failed to obtain the grapes, then he persuaded himself that the grapes were sour. And by imagining the grapes to be sour, he evoked in himself a change of attitude. He no longer felt about the grapes as he formerly felt. Now that's a little fable on a negative tone or a tragic tone. Sorry, motor's going by. It'll just be a second, guys. You and I take the same story, but now we put it on a positive tone. We contemplate our ambitious dream, our noble concept of life. It may seem we haven't the talents to realize it. Instead of saying what the fox did, that the thing is beyond us and therefore it is sour anyway, we can take the same technique and wonder what it would be like had we realized it. What would the feeling be like and we name it, if I can contemplate what the feeling would be like, were I the man I wanted to be? Were you the person that you wanted to be? And rejoice in that state as though it were true. I am producing in myself that emotional response necessary for seed time. So here Neville's talking about this cute little fable of the fox and the grapes. The fox tries to get some grapes to eat. When he is unable to obtain it, he's unable to get these grapes, he convinces himself in his mind that, oh, well, the grapes would have been sour anyways. So he's sort of changing his attitude and as a way of like a defense mechanism. But what Neville's saying here is we can take this example and use it for use it in a more positive tone, right? So we can take whatever our desire is, whatever we want to materialize, and even though it may seem unattainable, maybe we're not talented enough, maybe we don't have the qualifications, whatever the obstacle might be, we can, instead of, trying to convince ourselves of why we can't have it, we can contemplate on what it would be like were it now ours, right? By doing so, we're evoking a change of attitude, and that's the entire point. It's a change in how we feel in regards to what we desire. Continuing, I may not see an immediate harvest. Maybe the thing I am now giving expression to in the form of seed time is an oak. It is not a little mushroom that would grow overnight. Maybe my dream would take a little longer interval of time between the actual planting and the reaping. But if I know that all these things are consistent, see yonder fields, the seesmum was seesmum, the corn was corn, the silence and the darkness knew, so a man's fate is born. So if that moment of response is the actual planting of the seed, and if it was corn, it must be corn when it appears in harvest time. Then I can select the nature of the things I want to encounter in my world. I can take not just Neville as a man, I can take the request first of my circle, my intimate circle, as a family man, my wife's desires desires for her child, for her husband, for herself. The child a little circle as a family man, into the circle of friendships, move beyond that into my acquaintances, move beyond that into total strangers, impersonal states. But if I know the law, good, no matter when I operate it, if I do it unconsciously or consciously, you get results regardless. And the results are in harmony with the planting, with the actual seed time. So Neville's saying here that we can plant these seeds at any time for anything, not just ourselves, close to us, loved ones, friends, family, acquaintances, total strangers. There is no limitation because the law always holds good, and that no matter when I'm operating, if I'm conscious of it or not, you will get the harvest of whatever you plant, whatever seed you plant. Neville gave the example of if you plant corn, you're going to harvest corn. There will be corn in the harvest time. So we don't have to worry about planting an impression and seeing something turn out differently. It's always going to reap whatever it is that we sow. Now, what is our seed time today? There are maybe 2,000 odd here. We have 2,000 odd different requests. Multiplied by a large number because we have requests for others, but you can take today as you sit here were true. Suppose I could now with him because of his good fortune and actually carry on a mental conversation with him from the premise that he or she has already realized the dream. Now, as I do it in my imagination, I am setting up within myself a certain changed attitude in regard to that individual. I am producing within myself a certain positive, deliberate, emotional response. In that very moment that I do it is seed time. I will encounter that individual tomorrow or next week or next month, and he will bear witness of the thing that I plant now. He may be totally unaware that I planted it in this garden. I am not seeking his praise. I am not seeking credit. I am seeking results. If I see the man become the embodiment of the success, I know that he desires and I desire for him. That's praise enough. That's payment enough. What more payment would anyone desire other than the results? For everything is a gift. Why should I be given more? My father gave me the garden. The whole thing is in complete and full bloom and gave me choice. The greatest gift of all, complete freedom of choice of the nature of the fruit I will reap in my world. But I cannot just barge into the garden and start picking fruit. There must be a seed time. But I must always bear in mind I will reap that whereon I bestowed no labor. I don't labor to make it so. I simply plant it. For in that moment of response is contained all the plans, all the energy necessary to unfold that plan into a perfect, wonderful, objective fact, which I will then harvest by becoming aware of it as an external reality. But I don't labor to make it so. I simply must know it is so. So, again, just to sort of recap and reiterate, all we are being asked to do is change our inner attitude, change our inner perception, change how we are feeling in relation to whatever it is that we desire, whether it is for ourselves, whether it is for another, doesn't matter. We have all of creation. We have this greatest gift, the complete freedom of choice of the nature of the fruit that we will reap in this world. So essentially, there is no limits because there is no limits to what we can imagine. And by the garden, that is your imagination. But he says there must always be a seed time, in that we always will continue to reap whatever is sown. So all we must do is simply plant that seed, or that satisfaction or relief that this desired outcome has now taken place in imagination. And we don't labor to make this a reality. We don't force, we don't fight, we don't strain ourselves. We just have to trust that this is so. Let's continue. I'm so sorry for the noise in the background, guys. So that is our privilege. That is our choice. If you believe it, aren't you amazed at the kind of things that you planted? At the kind of seed time that in our ignorance, in our sleep, we allowed to actually scatter in our world? You see, some will say, but why does God allow it? You cannot conceive of an infinite God that is not infinite in every respect. This part is important. If I was incapable, actually incapable of assuming, say, an unlovely state, I could not be my Father's son because my Father is infinite. And if he were actually incapable of assuming any state, then he would not be God. Everything is within me, but everything. You cannot conceive of something that I don't contain. The most horrible thing in the world, were it not so I could not be infinite, and therefore not the son of my infinite Father. So God is infinite and gave us everything, but he gave us the freedom of choice that we may become selective, discriminative, and bring out everything that is beautiful out of that garden. If I took the piano, the 88 notes of the piano, I could extract from that piano keyboard every discord. I would not have a piano keyboard. If I could strike a discord and because it frightens me or disturbs me, the thing grates upon my nerves, if I could now extract the notes that produce the discord and then keep on extracting the notes that produce discord, I would remove the 88 notes. There would be no notes left on which I could play tomorrow's harmony. But let me leave the notes and learn the art of playing the piano so I can, from the same 88 notes, bring out all the harmonies of the world. So this part's important. Hang on. Because a lot of the times I get asked the question of why do these terrible things happen? I think we've all asked that question. Why, if there is a loving God, why does he allow such awful atrocities to take place in this world? And what Neville's saying here is that it could not be infinite if it didn't include all things, not just the good things, not just the things that are enjoyable and good nature and good report, but all things. That includes the terrible states. That includes the injustices, all the tragedies of the world. We could not say that God was infinite if it didn't include all things. All of creation needs to be finished, not just parts of it. But God did give us the power of selection and the power of choice so that we do not have to bear terrible fruit and rotten fruit. We can bear things that are lovely. That is our choice. But in order to have this human experience, there needs to be all states that are finished, all of creation being finished. The same thing is true of man. Instead of looking at someone and accepting as final there is someone who brought out in this own world, say disease. He is trying to analyze it from the outside. When did I contact the bug? When did I come in close contact with someone who had the bug? And they're taking me into the laboratory with my blood and try to find it there. You will never find it there, in spite of all the wisdom of man. You will find it only in the consciousness of the individual, who, at that moment, now long forgotten, planted the thing he is now harvesting. And your analysis at all, because things seen, things that do appear. You are warned time and time again in all the books of the Bible, but especially in that 11th chapter of the book of Hebrews, that things seen were not made of things that do appear, but no man believes it. He insists in finding it in things seen. So he extracts my blood, he extracts a little piece of my skin, and he starts to make an analysis of that. And he will tell me, yes, he has found it. It's in my blood. I'm not denying he has found it in my blood. But why is it in my blood? It is in my blood or in my body or in my world because at some point in time, I, exercising the right as a free child of God, singled out some unlovely state relative to another. It need not be to myself. It could be done to another, wherein I rejoiced in the hurt of another, where my emotional response to the news I heard was good, so I set it in motion. But when it happens in my world, I did not think it was so good, but it was from my harvest. And all these things are the harvest of things you and I have planted. It is only sudden because we have forgotten, and man's memory is very, very short. You know that lovely little poem of George Meredith, "Forgetful is green earth. The gods alone remember everlastingly. They strike remorselessly, and but their great memories the gods are known." So what Neville's saying here is really, really important. And this is arguably this most difficult thing for us to accept. That everything in our reality was something that we at one point put into motion unknowingly. There was a seed that was planted from a strong reaction that we had. Because the seeds are planted, the impressions are planted through our reactions, through our emotional responses. If I hear bad news and I have a strong response to it, I'm planting that seed. And I may not see the outpicturing for weeks, maybe even months. But every seed planted will become expressed inevitably, unless we revise it. And the next lecture I'm going to go into is going to really speak again on the importance of revision. If man could only remember these moments of seed time, he would never be surprised when the harvest appears in his world. But because he has no memory as to that moment in time when he dropped that seed, which is simply his emotional response to something he contemplated, something he overheard, something he observed, at that moment the thing was done. He didn't have to labor to bring it to harvest. He simply encountered it as something already full grown. So he reaps now that on which he bestowed no labor, outside of choice. He selected it by his attitude, by his reaction. Now, am I responsible for others in my world? I certainly am. When I take my little mind, my little imagination, and think because it's mine, my father gave it to me, that I can simply misuse it, it isn't going to hurt another. I tell you, you do have to use more control for the simple reason I am rooted in you and you are rooted in everyone, and all of us are rooted in God. There is no separate individual detached being in my Father's kingdom. We are one. I am completely responsible for the use or misuse of my imagination. We need to remember that part. That is buying this pearl of great price. That is the challenge. Can we say that I am completely responsible for the use or misuse of my imagination and what I am imagining for myself and for another? Well, we have to. We have to. And then Neville goes on to talk about a story about a man who essentially wrote a book about the Titanic 14 years before the Titanic sailed. It was the same premise, luxury liner, amazing, unsinkable, that ultimately sunk in this book that came out 14 years before the Titanic sailed. And so he's saying that there is no such thing as fiction. There is no such thing as things that are fake or false. Today's world was yesteryear's fiction, the dreams of men of yesteryear. Wouldn't it be wonderful if I could talk with someone across space and just use a wire? And I couldn't see that one. It would be a mile away beyond the range of my voice. Then maybe 5 miles, and maybe 1,000 miles. Fantastic dreams. Then they came true. When they came true, suppose I could do it without the means of a wire. And it came true. Suppose now I could do it, not just in audio sense, but in a video sense. Suppose I could be seen. And that came true. But when they were conceived, they were all fictional, all unreal. There is nothing unreal because God is infinite, and God has finished creation. You cannot conceive of something that your Father has not only done and conceived of it, it is worked out in detail, in all its ramifications. You and I are only becoming aware of increasing portions of that which already is. We are not making a thing. We are discovering God's wonderful world. But now in this church, at least here it should be done, for it is a church of the mind. That is science of mind, where there is a science to planting, and you do it in a certain scientific manner. You don't just walk the street and reflect, read the papers and reflect. You go out a more positive person than people who gather in similar areas. For the simple reason, they go just to hear a service and to be told how bad the world is. You're not coming here to be told how bad the world is. For if you believe it is bad, there is something you must do about it, because you have planted the world. You have your seed time. So here people gather to be told how to operate this wonderful gift that the Father gave them. There is this wonderful mind and imagination. So you were told to go out and be choosy in your selection. Single out the aspect of reality to which you want to respond. Success, health, dignity, nobility, something wonderful that you contribute to the good of the world. As you walk by, you are contributing to society. You contribute to the community in which you live, not necessarily by giving dollars, but you can contribute by your wonderful seed time. If in your community you see the need of maybe a church, you can see the need of some wonderful school. You don't wait until people get together. You actually, in your mind's eye, contemplate the joy that is yours because of the wonderful school here for the children, a wonderful church here to lift man spiritually. And you wonder what it would be like were it true. You feel the thrill of witnessing it within. That is seed time. Then in a way that you do not know, and you need not labor to produce, you will encounter that school and that church and these lovely things in your community. So you plant the seeds and let others, who think they are bringing it into being, let them think so. You go about this world planting the good. That is why you are here. We are gathered here on Sunday mornings to discover more and more about this wonderful gift God gave us, that we may single out all the lovely things in the world and bring them to birth in our world. He talks about how, basically how we go about doing this. Bring somebody into your mind's eye and congratulate them on their good fortune. Congratulate him on his expansion in this world and actually feel the thrill of such contact. At that moment of response, that was a changed attitude in regard to that friend. At that moment, you planted. Now, in a way you do not know, and you need not know, that seed is going to go through its normal natural hidden passage and appear as a reality in your world. Then you will know the power latent within you, and you will stop reflecting life, and you will become one, what I call a true creator, in the sense that I mean creator, that you are selecting wise, lovely things in this world and giving them expressions in this world of ours. So that is what I mean by Seedtime and Harvest. The importance of the right attitude. And you can do it. You need not wait for circumstances to change. You need not wait for the stimulus of a change in the object to produce in yourself the change of attitude. In your office, does the boss act in a way rude toward you? Well, then what would it be like if he now saw me, the lady, the helpful person that I really am or wanted to be? Again, he's talking about how you need to start seeing people as you would want to experience interaction with them and really put yourself in that and start to feel from that premise, because it is our attitude or reactions that must change before the outside changes. We cannot wait for the outside to reflect something different and then respond to it. That's not how this works. That is the moment of planting. It may not come tonight. It may not come this week in the paycheck, but it will come. You simply keep planting the lovely things. But if every day you leave the office, you say, "What a skinflint," and you go home and you discuss him with your mother or your husband or someone else, and they sympathize because they really believe you, for they are playing the same reflective negative approach. But if as you ride home or you walk in the attitude that he had done it, he had increased your income, he had praised your work day after day, in spite of other things to the contrary, you persisted in it, do you know he would do it? You will produce in him the change of heart because you first produce it in yourself. And he will see in you qualities that he cannot see. And then your whole vast world begins to blossom. You do it in every sense of the word. So that is the point